Welcome to Come Rain or Shine with Dan Cockerell. This is the show where we explore the power of leadership and culture on your organization's success. I'm your host, Jody Mayberry, and I'm here with Dan Cockerell. And Dan is at the community center in his town. So if you're watching the video version, you'll say, My, Dan's got a different background. Well, that's why. And if you're listening on audio, well, nothing has changed.
That's right. It's a lovely community center here in Superior, Colorado. I think it used to be maybe a car dealership, and they converted it. So it's got high ceilings, and they got a nice library and bean bags and board games and great Wi-Fi. So it's everything you want if you want to get out of the house.
And what else do you need? Bean bags, Wi-Fi, you're covered.
Hey man, life is good.
Well, Dan and I have been having good conversations lately, not recorded, and we thought we should actually record this because I don't know if I should just take a hint or what, but Dan has talked a lot about responsibility and how people need to take more responsibility. I'm not certain it's directed at me or if it's just thoughts Dan has had.
Well, Jody, that'd be pretty passive aggressive rather, if I was picking topics for our podcast to give you feedback. That probably wouldn't be the right way to give feedback. But yeah, I have this is something that I recently you Google a topic and then the algorithm says send you more of that. And in this case, I think I Googled taking responsibility. I read an article about it and I started getting more stuff and it really caught my attention. I think it's a great topic. It's not a new topic. It's not a topic that I think is unknown to anybody, but I think it's worth hearing. And I've listened to a couple of other podcasts recently that talked about this, and it really motivated me. And so the concept here, taking responsibility, it's really just understanding everything that happens to you is either an outcome of something you did, what you influenced, the decisions you made, or sometimes they're not at all. They have nothing to do with the decisions you made, but you still got to deal with them, and you need to manage them. And I think it's really easy in today's world just to complain about, hey, this happened to me, this isn't fair. I'm entitled to this, which people don't say they're entitled, but there's a lot of that going around. I'm supposed to have this. The other day, there's a great concept. This is probably a whole nother podcast. The concept was the balance between people's ambition and their willingness to put in effort. And so if you have a lower ambition, you probably can afford to put in a lower effort and you're probably going to get what you expected. And if you have a high ambition to achieve things and a high work ethic and effort, you're probably going to be a good place. Where it really gets out of whack is people that have a high ambition and low effort, and it turns into frustration. It turns into, and I think a main theme there is not taking responsibility. So let me just give you a few examples. There's so many examples in our lives, and this is not just about one business situation, one personal situation. This is, I think, a mindset of how you deal with things. An easy one, right? I start working with somebody. In our business, you and I, we work with a lot of people as partners. We don't hire them. They're not our employees, but we partner with them. And then maybe sometimes something doesn't go right. They don't follow through on what they said they were going to do. They didn't follow through on a promise they made, and they sell us short. And we really get frustrated with that. Well, gosh, this is the fifth time this has happened, the third time this has happened. Why are they doing this? And we don't stop to think to ourselves, well, wait a second. I'm the person who chose to work with this person. I'm the one who chose to have this happen 3 times. And either I haven't given the feedback to this person about the consequences if they don't fix this behavior, or I just keep working with them. And that's not taking responsibility. So even when you hire employees that aren't working out, you got to get to a point where you take responsibility for the hire and you either fix it or you get rid of them and they go on their way. And then I know you have some great stories about extreme ownership and the book, but I want to give a couple of examples of that. One is, my dad had worked for Marriott for years, and when he was at one of the Marriott as a food and beverage director, Mr. Marriott came to visit. Mr. Marriott was very hands-on. He was in hotels. He wanted to see the kitchen. He wanted to see checklists. I mean, he was in the weeds, and which was high accountability. And one day they were touring the hotel, and Mr. Marriott, who was leaving, told my father, he said, "Hey, by the way, that mailbox out front of the hotel, please get that cleaned." And of course, my dad at the time didn't get the message. "Yes, sir. We'll make sure it's clean. We'll keep it clean." His was, "Well, Mr. Barrett, we don't own that mailbox. The federal government does." And Mr. Barrett's point of view was, "Well, it's in front of our hotel, and people will judge us based on everything around us. So make sure it gets cleaned." He had no regard. He didn't care who owned it. He took responsibility for it. There's another story about Mr. Marriott Sr., who was on the turnpike, I don't know, in maybe the 70s and 80s, and they stopped at one of the restaurants at the rest stops, and he told his assistant when they left, please make sure that the bathrooms and the cleanliness of this place is improved. It's a disgrace. And she said the same thing my dad did. "Well, Mr. Marriott, we don't own this." He said, "I don't care who owns it. It's a disgrace to the hospitality industry." So he was taking responsibility for that. So these stories for me really help me. And I don't always take full responsibility. Sometimes I look around and say, why am I in this situation? And it really takes me to take a step back to say, well, okay, Dan, what did you do to get yourself in this situation? What could you have done to not be in this situation? I think that's an important piece. And I got a couple more stories, but I'll stop for a moment, and Jody, and let you to weigh in on kind of what I'm talking about here, which you're so good at. And then I'll get back to my storytelling.
Well, I've heard a lot of those good Marriott stories from Dan's dad, because first of all, what an opportunity to actually get to work with the Marriotts and then have stories like that. One of the more popular ones that I thought Dan might bring up is the fly story. You know that one, Dan? I'm sure you do.
If you have flies, you like flies.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Lee was running a restaurant, I think in Philadelphia. I don't remember. But Bill Marriott came to inspect, and there was flies in the restaurant, and he said, "Lee, why are there flies in your restaurant?" And Lee's like, "Well, because flies get in, we try to take care of them." And Mr. Marriott said, "If you have flies, you like flies. Otherwise, you would do anything possible to make sure there are no flies." And that's the sort of responsibility, I guess, that if you want Marriott standards, you have to adopt that. And we had one when I was a park ranger. There was a park manager, who had expectations about no spider webs or cobwebs on building exteriors. So if you imagine walking to an outhouse in a park, and you see a spider web on the side, you wouldn't think anything of it because you're in a park, right? That's what I thought. There's spiders everywhere. They build webs. But it's your responsibility as a ranger to make sure they're not on the park buildings, because according to this manager, and I learned so much from her, if there are spider webs and cobwebs on the side of the building, it shows we don't give it attention, that we don't show up there, which is a wrong and bad impression. And therefore there shall be no spider webs and cobwebs on any structure in the park. And that was perhaps the first hint I ever got of, well, it's not my fault, but it is my responsibility to make sure something happens here.
Yeah, Jody, you just mentioned a great phrase. It's not your fault, but it is your problem. It's your responsibility. So two more stories. One is going to be an employee story, and one's a guest story. Let me start with the guest story. I remember working when I was a general manager at the All-Star Resort, and we would have guests arrive at the hotel, and most of them arrived with their luggage, or if they had at the time the Magical Express, their luggage would get there. And there was a percentage of time when you have so many guests coming in that the airline lost the luggage, or it was delayed. These things happen when you have millions and millions of guests coming. And what we decided was at the All-Star was, and every Disney hotel takes this responsibility. You know what? If you show up at our hotel and you don't have your luggage, we're going to figure out how to get you what you need. And so we did a few things. One is we call it the magic cabinet at the front desk behind. We sort of, every time we had a situation where someone needed something, we would go buy it, and then we would buy 5 of them and we put it in our magic cabinet. So you get a guest show up and they're like, oh my gosh, we just got here and we don't have we don't have our luggage and we're going to the parks tomorrow. Well, you know what? We have like 5 or 6 different sizes of shorts and t-shirts and socks. So if you'd like, we can give you a pair of each of those so you can at least get to the parks tomorrow until your clothing arrives. Or, the airline said they lost our luggage. They have no idea when we're going to get them. Well, you know what we're going to do? We're going to put you in a car. We're going to go to Walmart and we're going to go ahead and you can go ahead and buy them. Well, I haven't budgeted. I don't have enough money. Well, I'll tell you what, it's on us. We'll get you enough to get through this. We had toothbrushes, toothpaste, combs. I mean, go through everything someone needs on a vacation. And if their luggage gets lost. So at the end of the day, it would be so easy to say, well, we will call the airline for you, which we did. We would call the airline because we had good contacts at the airport. But it wasn't just that. You just can't tell a guest, well, we're sorry you don't have anything. But, American Airlines, United Airlines, fill in the airline blank. That's really that's not our problem. And you'd never tell a guest that. But what we told our employees and we told our managers, it's not our fault the luggage is lost, but it is our problem because our responsibility at Disney is to make sure every single guest has a great vacation. That's our responsibility. We are accountable and we're on the hook for all that. We are responsible for only some of that. And so we can't control what the airline does. We can't control the weather. There's a bunch of stuff that we can't control and things do go wrong. But if you go in this with this ownership, responsibility mindset, you end up doing some things that are unexpected and I'd call it remarkable. And in the moment, the naysayers and the people in sort of the finance department say, well, look, if you start giving away free clothes to every guest that checks in here, we're not going to make any money. Well, it's not every guest. It's 1 in 1,000, 1 in 2,000, 1 in 3,000, whatever it is. And we can afford to do that. And the story that's going to be told afterwards of the responsibility that we took to make sure this person's vacation wasn't ruined because one of our partners messed up is going to be the reason that they tell other stories and the reason they come back and the reason they're going to trust us, because we don't pick and choose when we're responsible. We take responsibility all the time. And I know a lot of people out there are saying, well, Dan, that sounds great to me, but boy, if I give away anything in my business, my manager comes and they want to know why I gave it away and they want all this information. It's a mindset and it's a policy, and you can't think about this short term. You got to think about it long term, and you have to go ahead and own it. And when you do that, you will differentiate your business. People tell stories about things you do no other businesses have done, and it makes a huge difference. I was at Starbucks the other day, and Starbucks, they got great systems. They're organized. I seldomly have a problem there, but I'd ordered something. They were really, really busy. I waited past the time I thought things should be ready. It wasn't there. And when finally it came, she said, I'm really sorry about that. That cup fell. It kind of fell between the cracks. And here's your drink, and here's a gift card for a free drink next time. Sorry for that. Took responsibility. They could have just given me the coffee and gone on my way, and I'm going to go back there. I mean, I'll go there. I like working there, but that little piece is they were empowered to take responsibility and ownership when they didn't deliver the standard that they expected. And that's what differentiates good companies from great companies.
All right, Dan. So not everyone gets to work at a company like Disney, whose purpose is to make sure every guest has the best vacation of their life and empowers people to do it. Or Starbucks that empowers them to give you a free coffee for next time. I still think, though, there are ways you even within the boundaries you may have to take responsibility. And you've covered enough about this concept. I don't think you need to talk more about that in particular, but I want you to set the stage on when you've supervised enough people. I'm sure you have seen an employee take ownership and responsibility way beyond the other people around them. When that happens, so if someone starts to practice what you've talked about As a supervisor, what does that tell you about this person, and what are their prospects within that company now that they've been noticed taking so much responsibility?
Yeah, great question. And here's the funny thing I've found. First of all, every group of employees that I've led, the employees usually are much more conservative with the company's resources than the managers are. They're so protective. You have to tell them sometimes it's okay. You can give that away. You can handle that because either the policies have been too strict, and they talk about, well, the last time someone did that, they got fired. I'm like, no one got fired for giving away a free cup of coffee. Now, maybe if they gave it every day to a friend of theirs, yeah, that's called theft. If you are siding on the side of the guest, even if you end up maybe going a little bit too far, you're not going to get in trouble. We'll just coach you. You know what? Next time, instead of refunding all their park tickets because they dropped their ice cream, maybe just give them another ice cream next time. And that'll be enough. That's kind of a extreme example, but this idea is when you are able, the leaders are able to get the employees to start taking, I call them risks, because it's a risk to go outside the normal decision-making process and do this. And a lot of employees they don't want to take risks. They want to know what they can do and what they can't do. So when I see an employee taking this kind of a responsibility and ownership of the guest experience, they are differentiated. And if they want to move into maybe another role, get promoted, that's going to put them in a great light. If they are not interested in getting promoted and they just want to be seen as a great performer, then we recognize that they become a role model for everybody else. So I'll share a story with you because I talked about this at a workshop recently. It was with Boyne Resorts. Boyne runs ski areas up in New England, and they run Big Sky out in Montana. Great company. And one of the leaders told a story because I talked about this extreme ownership. He said, "Oh yeah," and I forget her name now, but it was one of the quick service restaurants at one of their ski resorts. And he walked in the restaurant one day, and she was walking out of the kitchen with a plate full of French fries. And he said, "Hey, how you doing? Good. Hey, where are you going with those French fries?" She's like, "Well, I'm giving them to a guest because his kid dropped them, and I'm replacing them." And he kind of semi-joked around. He says, "Well, who said you're allowed to go just get French fries out of the kitchen?" She said, "I'm giving myself permission. The guest dropped French fries. We're here to make sure they have a great thing. I went in the kitchen, I took the fries, and I'm giving them to them." So, and I think she'd worked there for a while, so she had that confidence. But she owned it. She owned it, and even when the general manager questioned and just asked a question about why she did it, she didn't have to. She didn't even worry about defending herself. She says, "This is why I do this, because we're here to serve." And he made a big deal out of that. So you got to but leaders have to create this environment. They have to create the opportunities for employees to do this. And I think the best way to do it is tell stories, brainstorm. Hey, you know what? If we have a long wait in our shop, maybe at peak periods of at the end of the night and one of the merchandise locations when the park is emptying, or maybe at midday when the quick service restaurants are really busy, what are we allowed to do to take ownership and take responsibility for not delivering the standard that we are expected to deliver? Can I add an extra dessert? Say, really, I really apologize for the wait. I'm going to add a dessert, and to help you out today, or to, just kind of show you how much we care about that. Or are we going to have someone say, you know what, I'm going to go ahead in line and give out bottles of water, or talk to guests, or maybe hand out menus. So you can get ahead of this and you can teach, but you have to teach it. You can't wait for that one employee that's going to be the kind of the naysayer, or go outside the boundaries. You have to talk about it all the time, talk about the level of responsibility, and give stories. Examples are such a powerful thing, because when people hear a story, they can now relate it to their work, and now they have some context about what they're allowed to do.
One more example for you, Dan, and this can be our final one. Let's say you go on a vacation and you end up staying at like Motel 6 in Cedar City, and there's signs everywhere, and your family gets home, and I shouldn't pick on a hotel chain like that. I'm just saying, Dan and I were there, and there were some signs that we've gotten a lot of mileage out of. But let's just say that's your experience, Dan. You come home and your family's just Valerie said, "Dan, this just wasn't this vacation was okay." What do you do?
Well, obviously, you need to take responsibility and you got to take ownership and you have to tell your loved one, you know what? Next time I'm not booking this vacation because obviously I failed here. I'm going to find a professional who's going to take responsibility to make sure I have a fantastic trip and a fantastic vacation. You know who that is, Jody?
I do. If you want to take responsibility for your own vacation, call Magical Vacation Planner. You can reach them at 407-442-0257 or go to dancockerell.com. You'll see a banner right there on the website. Well, Dan, this has been a fabulous conversation. And I think if you're interested in this, certainly follow up with Dan. To go to dancockerell.com and use the contact form. But a good book on it is Extreme Ownership by Jocko Winnick. That is, and he's got a podcast, I believe, by the same name. So you can go deeper into it there. But I think this is a great topic, and it certainly will set you apart. You will be distinguished and differentiated from other people around you if you follow this. So thank you so much, Dan, and thank you for listening to Come Rain or Shine.